Welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today we are going to discuss the module Thomism, and this module is written by V. Harinarayanan of IIT Jodhpur. I am Raghuram Raju from University of Hyderabad. Thomism is the doctrine that is available to us in the writings of Saint Thomas Aquinas. One of the important aspects of Aquinas is he is both a theologian and also a philosopher. Now that's a very complex combination one can have. Religious doctrines largely accept faith or they are based on belief. In contrast, philosophy largely asks for reasons and justifications. So handling both religion or theology and philosophy is a very arduous task. It's also a tricky one. And the importance of Aquinas lies in handling it diligently, and he does a superb job. Now, before we understand the way in which Thomas Aquinas handles both these disciplines, namely philosophy and religion, that is theology, let us note the following that provides a large background to Saint Thomas Aquinas. Aquinas is influenced by, in fact, he translated and wrote commentaries on Aristotle. So Aristotelian influence on Saint Thomas Aquinas is enormous. There is also influence of Neoplatonists on Aquinas. The third important influence on Aquinas is the rise of natural sciences during his time. So you find that there are three important and dominant aspects that provide background to Thomas Aquinas, namely Aristotle, Neoplatonists, and the natural sciences. So this provides the background to Saint Thomas Aquinas' philosophy. But as I mentioned in the beginning, that he is also a practicing theologian. He is a part of church. So there is something very interesting about this combination. So one can say that Thomas Aquinas is a religious person by profession, but by temperament he is a philosopher. That's the important thing. Now, handling these two things is a very challenging job. So in the works of Aquinas, you find this combination working in an interesting way, that he accepts God, and then he's very famous for giving proofs for the existence of God. He doesn't say, for instance, that you should accept God and there is God. He will not say that you have to accept God out of faith or it's just a belief. He strives hard to provide justification. He gives these famous proofs for the existence of God. We will come to it later. One of the important implications of accepting theology is, as I said, the theology is based on faith, and you don't ask for justification or reasons for accepting the theological beliefs. Okay? The only justification that one has is that they come to us from scriptures, and you do not ask why scriptures have to be accepted or not to be accepted, because scriptures are sacred and sacred things have to be accepted. But the point which is of importance in Aquinas is he comes up with this following argument where he says that even in scientific statements of interpreting that the earth is round. Okay, a mathematician's interpretation is different from a natural philosopher's interpretation. Now, natural philosopher will interpret it differently from the mathematician's interpretation of the earth. Okay, so saying that if there is a variety of interpretations of the same reality called roundness of earth, why not have one more interpretation, which is a divine revelation? That why not accept third interpretation, which is a religious interpretation of the same phenomena or the existence of God? So look at Aquinas' strategy. Aquinas does not just say that there is a natural sciences which is objective, which is based on justification and rationality, and there is religion which is not based on rationality, it is based on faith. He says that within the objective sciences or natural sciences, there is a variety, there is a difference. So if there is a difference between two natural sciences, be it mathematics or natural or physics, okay, why can't we have a third one? Look at the attempt by Saint Thomas Aquinas to provide reason for a third possibility, which is in the form of religion or theology. So for instance, Aquinas would say that there are these two domains, the religious domain and the philosophical domain. Now, aspects of religion such as God need not be confined to the discussions within religion. The religious issues can also be philosophically dealt with, philosophically analyzed. For instance, he says that take the instance of God. Now, one can philosophically ask, what is the nature of God's revelation? What is the nature of God's nature? How is God related to human persons? What is the purpose of human being and the nature of morality of human beings within the matrix of the acceptance of God? All these things, that the creation by God, the nature of God, the purpose of human being, the nature of morality, all these things can be philosophically reflected. This is the unique aspect of Saint Thomas Aquinas. The other important aspect of Saint Thomas Aquinas is he accepts that there is a theoretical realm and there is also a practical realm. But then he would say that they are interrelated. They are interrelated. For instance, he would say that philosophy has a theoretical realm. Philosophy also has a practical realm. Okay, so he would say, for instance, the practical philosophy consists of ethics, economics, and politics. The theoretical realm consists of physics, mathematics, and metaphysics. So both of them are there. So the order of the universe consists of both the need to have both theoretical knowledge and also practical knowledge. So in other words, he will not accept to that view where people maintain that the job of philosophy is merely contemplative exercise and it is merely theoretical. It has nothing to do with practical. Okay, practical is something else. And somebody might say that religion deals with practical, philosophy deals with the theoretical. He would say no, they are interrelated and they can be dealt with in the same discipline. That, in other words, religion has both theoretical and practical aspects. Philosophy too has both theoretical and practical aspects. So he would say that metaphysics deals only with the most general forms of things, or what is called as common being. Theology, however, can depend upon revelation and it deals with the nature of God and other matters. Unaided reason can never grasp in its kens. So that is the major difference that you have in Saint Thomas Aquinas. Now let us look at what is the metaphysics in Thomism. The metaphysics is an important aspect in Saint Thomas Aquinas. So the metaphysical aspects of Thomism consist of the following. They are essence and existence, substance and accident, matter and form. Let us now look at these with some discussion in detail. According to Aquinas, essence is the definable nature of things that exists. As far as the finite entities are concerned, essence and existent are distinct, but there can be one and only being whose essence is existence. That means there are two important things, that is essence and existence. To support this assertion, Aquinas provides the following argument. This is the important thing. He doesn't only say that there is essence and existence, but he gives you arguments why they are there. Whatever, according to Aquinas, belongs to a thing can belong to it in two different ways. And two different ways of belonging are, one is intrinsically belonging, the other one is extrinsically belonging. One is the internal, the other one is the external. If a thing is the cause of its own existence, then it would have to precede itself in existence. For instance, there is a thing, and this thing is caused by something else. That something else which caused it should exist before. Okay, now if that exists before, then it cannot belong to the thing, because it has to precede, and if it precedes, then it cannot be a part of what it created. So it is a very contradictory position. That means that if essence and existence are distinct in a thing, then it must be caused to exist by something else. So that if there is a thing, and that thing must have been caused by something else and not by itself. Okay? In order to avoid infinite regress, the only option left is to accept that there is one entity for whose essence and existence are the same. Okay? And that is God. That is God. Unless you accept something which is not caused, something in which two things cannot be distinguished, and you will not be able to avoid infinite regress. So that is an argument for the metaphysical doctrine of essence and existence that you have in Aquinas. The second important thing in the metaphysics of Aquinas is the substance and accident. A substance, according to Aquinas, is what primarily exists. Substance is one of the core, the ontological concepts. It can be said that the ontology of Aquinas consists of substance, with change being understood as the modification of an existing substance or one substance giving rise to another substance. So there is a substance, and the substance can be modified, and that can give rise to another substance. But the problem is in the following manner. Thus, a substance can be said to be a composite of essence and existence. Substance are basic, and other things are predicated of them. Accordingly, animals such as horses and monkeys, or objects such as trees and rocks, can all be said to be instances of a substance. Accidents are those things that modify substance. That is to say, the identity of a thing does not depend on its accidents. The identity depends upon its substance. For instance, a tree may be tall, or it can be a short, and these differences do not make to cease something to be a tree. It's still a tree, and tree is a substance even though it has different kinds of things. Accidents cannot exist by themselves. That is, accidents are always predicated or related to substance. They do not exist on their own. The tallness do not exist independent of the tree. It is tall is dependent on the tree. They need to be, that is, accident need to be associated with some substance for their existence. In other words, they need to be exemplified by some substance. So when an object is red colored, we can say that the accident of redness is exemplified in that object. The other important metaphysical aspect in Thomism is matter and form. Matter refers to a stuff out of which a thing is made, whereas form refers to the organization that matter takes. For instance, consider a marble statue. The marble statue constitutes the matter of the statue, but without a particular shape, no stuff can become a statue, and it is the shape that is signified by the word form. So there is a marble, and the marble itself does not become a statue. Okay, a marble has to be made into a statue. So that is the form. That is the form, and marble is the content. But what is important is that marble is that which is structured, and thus structuring is done on the basis of a form. Okay, now you can clearly see that there is an Aristotelian influence on Aquinas here about form and content in Aristotle. But what is important here is that there is a very subtle distinction Aquinas makes about different levels. Now, from one particular level of a statue, okay, a statue made out of marble is a form. But if you look at from other point of view, that the marble itself is a form. Marble itself is a form, So it is a form only with reference to a statue. Marble is a matter and statue is a form. But outside the reference of statue, marble itself can become a form. Okay, because you call something as a marble because it has certain matter and it is in the form of a marble. That's the important distinction that Saint Thomas Aquinas introduces. So it is important to remember that whenever we talk of matter and form, it is within the framework of a particular level only, and not to be confused with the absolute understanding of matter and form. The third important aspect of Saint Thomas Aquinas' philosophy, metaphysical aspect of his philosophy, is moral philosophy, which is a very, very important thing. Thomism has become very important subjects which is recalled subsequently, particularly by people like Alistair MacIntyre in his book After Virtue. The moral philosophy of Aquinas can be called eudaimonistic and is based on the notion of virtue. The virtue theory of the contemporary moral philosophy also draws largely from Aquinas. All human actions, according to Aquinas, are directed towards happiness. So when you act, and the action has a teleology, has a telos, namely happiness. Insofar as any act is conducive towards achieving this end, which is happiness, it can be said to be a good action. And if it does not lead to happiness, then it is a bad action. So actions in accordance with human nature turns out to be good. In Summa Theologia, he provides a list of virtues, the most important of which are prudence, temperance, courage, and justice, which are called as the cardinal virtues. Prudence can be understood as right reason in the context of action, that you perform an action, and what is the reason for performing that action is the idea that comes from prudence. This implies both knowledge of general moral principles as well as the particular circumstances. As I mentioned to earlier, that what is important to Aquinas is that you not only have a theoretical idea of a concept, but also the practical consequences of that concept. So prudence has both aspects, that it is not just an understanding in an abstract way, it is also sets you a practical domain that is very important. The virtue of prudence involves the ability to understand complex moral concepts and to select the right course of action while being sensitive to the context. So it is the rightness of an action and it is also appropriateness of the context. Both of them are imbricated within all virtues, and what prudence as a virtue has these facilities. The second important virtue is temperance. Temperance is something which is to do with moderation. it is important to exercise restraint in worldly pleasures such as eating, drinking, and so on. So he's not saying that don't eat, don't indulge in worldly goods and worldly pleasures. He's saying that when you do it, you should moderate your desires. You should moderate your desires. What performs this? What comes to the aid of a human being in moderating his worldly desires from seeing that they don't get into excesses or you don't indulge, is the virtue called moderation, and that comes from temperance. So the important thing about this particular virtue is that it allows you to enjoy worldly affairs, but it also tells you that you should not get engrossed into it, you should not get indulged into it, because getting indulged into it takes you away from your actual goal, which is realization of God. Realization of God. That's the most important thing about this virtue, this virtue. The third important one, according to Aquinas, is courage. Courage is also an important, in fact, it is exercising temperance and prudence requires a tremendous courage. That if you want to be prudent, if you want to be temperate, you need to be courageous. Both of them require courage. So it is in that sense that courage is the one which is at the back of the other two important virtues, namely the temperance and prudence. So if you don't have courage, then you can't be prudent, you can't be temperate. Fourth, and this is the most important virtue that Aquinas talks about, is justice. And justice requires, as you all know, a social context. Justice has to be an overriding concern in all human relationships. That is to say, the common good has to be the overall aim of our actions, and this can be achieved by using justice as the yardstick to select actions that have a direct bearing on others. So it involves interpersonal relations and it presupposes social context. The next important aspect of Aquinas metaphysics is God. As I mentioned to you, that Aquinas gives you a philosophical justification or proof for the existence of God. He accepts God as enunciated by the scriptures, but he also tries to give rational arguments. Aquinas begins by saying God is necessary. You cannot, live without God. But what is important to note here is he doesn't stop there. He doesn't say that God is important and that is self-evidently true. He will not stop the argument at that level. He will say that the self-evident nature of God is not enough, is not even acceptable. He would say that it rests on a misunderstanding. What is important is that you have to give reasons, you have to give proofs for the existence of God. And let's see how he undertakes this arduous task. Aquinas gives 5 arguments to demonstrate the existence of God in his book Summa Theologia. The first argument is an argument about motion. He says that motion can be understood as a movement from potentiality to actuality. If a thing moves, then that thing cannot be the source of its own movement. Something should move that. Okay? Now, if you keep on saying that something else should move that particular thing that moves this one, and it goes on, and there is an infinite regress. So that is the reason why he says that we must accept first cause, and that is not moved. There is something that causes everything else, and that is not caused. Because if that also is made to be caused, then there is something else, and that leads to infinite regress. And that particular first cause, which is not moved but moves everything, is God. Okay. The second argument, second proof for the existence of God is the consideration is that of an efficient cause. Here the argument is similar to the one given above. Okay, that a thing cannot be both an efficient cause of itself and being caused. Okay, that means for any efficient cause, there must be a prior cause and there must be a first cause, otherwise there will be a never-ending series. In other words, that something causes something else causes something else, but the problem is what is it that which caused this particular thing, and that according to Aquinas, is a first cause, and that is associated with God. The third one is the reality of contingency. The contingency argument proceeds by pointing out that the fact that all things in nature are contingent, in the sense that they could or might have not existed as well. So one could say that they did not exist, or it may not have existed. It is a contingent factor that it existed. That means that everything depends upon something else for its existence. Everything is contingent on the other one. But it can't be possible that the whole universe consists of only contingent beings. There must be at least one thing that is not contingent and necessary. Okay, and that, according to Aquinas, is God. The fourth one is a different grades of perfection in the order of nature. For instance, there are human beings who are imperfect and they become perfect. There are animals who are imperfect and they also can try to grow and evolve. Okay, but then there is somebody who is not amenable for growth or moves from imperfection to perfection, and that perfect person is God. The fifth one, the last one, is the end-directed activity of natural objects. So each thing is directed towards something else. So there is a telos, and there must be something that can be said to be the final end or purpose. He does not claim that God exists, but seeks to give arguments in support of the existence of God. And that final purpose is God. That final purpose is God. So he gives thus 5 proofs for the existence of God. Now, what is important in the entire discussion is that he does not accept God out of faith, or does not postulate God under the domain of belief. He thinks that you have to give philosophical reasons, or what he calls as proofs, for the existence of even a theological concept called God. Having said that, one of the major preoccupation, major element in Aquinas is attempting to give philosophical justification for theological beliefs. Let me just point out that he is a practicing, Christian. Okay, and he accepts all 3 major doctrines of Christianity. The first one is incarnation. The second one is that God takes the human birth in the form of Jesus Christ, and that Christ suffers so that the human beings overcome their estrangement with God and be in union with God to get back to the original state that got severed with the fall, the doctrine of fall. The third important doctrine of Christianity that Aquinas accepts is the Trinity. Okay, God is one, but there are 3 persons, namely the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All the 3 important aspects of Trinity are accepted by Saint Thomas Aquinas, and these 3 important doctrines of Christianity are also accepted by Aquinas. What is striking about Saint Thomas Aquinas is an attempt where one tries to give a philosophical justification for theological beliefs. If you take Thomas Aquinas seriously, you will not be able to argue, or it's difficult for you to argue, that philosophy is different from theology. Philosophy is different from religion. Aquinas is an example where these 2 domains come in interaction with each other, and they see that each one can be dependent on the other. He would say that God is important, and that comes from religion. Reason is important, and that comes from philosophy. Now, instead of seeing them as mutually exclusive, as different from each other, as fallen apart from each other, he finds them. It is in that sense he brings them together. He becomes a facilitator to bring both philosophy and religion together. That, I think, is one of the important contribution of this great philosopher come theologian, Saint Thomas Aquinas. Thank you.